I recognize that we have the entire audit committee present.
We don't have any more. They were really thick packets.
You can take mine.
Here.
I just need something right, man. Commissioner.
Oh, yeah. No, right here. Set up for a moment.
Big hello.
You must be expecting something.
Our first item on the agenda is in fact approval of the current agenda. And David has just, in the last 5 minutes, informed me of some conditions that suggest that we need to amend this agenda by deleting some of the areas. I'll ask David to address the issues that he thinks should not be on the agenda.
Just item 6 is the update on the plan. That plan still has not been finalized from the RSM group, and specifically, it was my understanding after conferring with the clerk that that report and plan was to be returned to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, we're in disagreement, and I think
Irrespective,
you were there.
is there any way we could just hear an interim update of any
I'm just telling you that it was my understanding that that my response was to be submitted to the Board of Commissioners, and that was, I think it improper for me to provide a report to this board that the commissioners have not heard, especially since the report has not even been finalized yet.
As I say, we disagree in that, Mayor, but we will resolve this at the next board meeting. I'll put that on the agenda for the next board meeting, and we'll make it really clear that the audit committee would be reviewing proposed or actually implemented changes to the internal control system, whether it's based on RSM report or not, prior to taking before the audit committee would take anything to the board. And that's fine. So we will delete number,
Well, what was it going to be? I thought it was just an update from David.
it was just, and I understood, just so we all know, I understood that the board wanted, in fact, we were really careful wording that the board, our audit committee was not to tell the town how to make the changes or to approve any changes, but just review the changes that were being proposed or made and give the audit committee's input to the town in that regard. If David feels that he's really clear that the board didn't want that, then we'll just clarify that at the board meeting on next Tuesday, a week from Tuesday. David, you also had, cool.
Well, I think this is the current ordinance of what our mission, our vision, whatever it is, but it says we're supposed to assist and advise the Board of Commissioners in its oversight responsibilities for the town's financial reporting, system of internal controls, and its external audit process. So can we assist and advise?
Well, David's saying that he's not allowed to talk to us without having talked to the board first.
So my only point is, are we able to do our job?
So we'll clarify with the board at the next meeting
Okay.
what that means. And your question was on the RSM, well, you wouldn't do that. Actually, we're gonna, number 5 is okay. That's Tony's and your feedback. So it's number 6, it would be out. You also had one other piece of new information you just received today, David?
Yes, that the 2018 audit as submitted by Rives and Associates has been bounced by the local government commission. There were issues that were identified as inadequacies in the submission by Rise and Associates, and will need to be resubmitted. I don't know whether you should delete item 8 from the agenda, or leave it on there and discuss those as part of the evaluation of continuance of their contract.
Well, in the event that we would, it would almost, if we had to wait another
Well, I think
period of time, I think it's still a worthwhile topic, even if,
Yeah, I think if, and I have no idea because my understanding was that the audit was not submitted to the LGC for approval. It couldn't be because we didn't have the contract and they can't approve it without a contract. But if it was just sent for comment, even that would be important. If in fact it wasn't done properly,
That's not correct.
we wouldn't want to make a
That's,
decision.
that's not correct.
What's not correct?
That it was not submitted to the local government commission.
For approval.
Yep.
It was sent for review, not for approval.
I'd suggest you leave that item on the agenda to discuss it.
Say again?
I'd suggest that you leave that item on the agenda to discuss it.
Which item is that?
Number 8.
yeah, which is fine. We'll talk about it when that item comes up, I think is what he's saying.
We can leave it on the
off.
agenda, that's fine.
Just leave it.
So Shelley, number 6 that you want to eliminate?
That's my suggestion.
Okay, so we eliminate number 6. We're okay with that? Anybody not okay with that? And we'll deal with that. We'll clarify this at the next board meeting, and then we will have, because we have anticipate having a meeting with the auditor very soon. He couldn't get here today, but very soon. And when we can where we all get together and can do that, we can make that. We'll know by that time what else we can get done here.
Do you think it might be appropriate to switch items 7 and 8 here? In that, depending on what we might decide on 8 might affect
Oh, we can do
the
that?
schedule of your
We can do
meeting. I
that.
just think,
Yeah, we can do that. Everybody okay with that? We just reverse?
as long as there's a little background here to understand.
Okay, okay.
Let me ask a question. The news David brought us about the LGC bouncing the audit, do we need to have that as item C or something under number 8 so we can discuss it?
Well, I'm not, David, do you have details on the,
All I have is a notification from the local government commission.
so there's no more
I
details?
think that's pertinent information that could be added to support any decisions that we made in that regard. So I don't know that we couldn't discuss that as part of that topic.
And I want to ask some questions too about the process of when it goes to LGC and what they're doing and things like that. So I'd like to put item C under here, LGC approval, whatever you want to call it.
We can't do that, this is a special, well,
Now, this is a regular meeting. You can add or delete
so we
items
can't,
from the
we can't.
agenda.
This is
So it sounds like just in process.
So what do you want to add to the agenda?
Item C under 8, which would be the LGC approval process
The audit
Yep.
approval process.
by LGC.
So discussion of process to approve
Audit.
annual audit
Yep.
reports. Okay, clerk, are we okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Discussion of discussion of the process to approve the annual audit report. Anything else?
Do you get to renumber when you change the agenda?
She can capture it in terms of swapping.
Okay, can we take a vote on the decision to approve the agenda
Move that
as we,
I made we approve the agenda as amended and discussed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against?
They're swapping seconds.
So it's, the motion's approved. Then move to the number 3, the approval of the minutes for the prior meeting. So a motion to approve the minutes of the prior meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, next is review of the end of the fiscal year financial statements. So we're looking at the packet that we were given. Before we do that, David, can I ask why May's financials were put in the packet?
That was, I think that was part of Tony's report, was the May financials.
Part of,
That part of Tony's section was the May financials, wasn't it?
Yeah, the statements I did were on the last records I had, which were May, so maybe that's where the May ones came from.
okay.
So the support for the summary reports I prepared.
Okay, so, how do I do this? David, do you want to do it?
No, the information I provided was, as of the end of the fiscal year. It's 30 January.
Okay. So, do you want to lead off with anything, David? Do you want,
No, I do know that there's been I'm sorry.
There's,
You want me to go? Okay. I do know that there's been a recurring question on the miscellaneous revenue in the general fund, in Fund 10, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, that's page 2 of the general fund. We were several months back, we were well over $100,000 in that miscellaneous account. And John, I know you had specific concerns on that, and pretty much, we had parked the FEMA reimbursements money in there until we were actually had the FEMA reimbursements budget amendments approved by the board. So those funds have been transferred out. Some was right at about $100,000, whether it was in Fund 10, the general fund, or over in the water and sewer fund, or the B-Part fund. So that miscellaneous line is now taken care of. Generally speaking, the revenues collected this year in the general fund are some almost $230,000 more than we had appropriated, and a fund more than we had anticipated. Primarily, there was $80,000 of that was FEMA reimbursements in Fund 10. And also, we're not going to have to make a fund balance appropriation this year to offset any expenses that would have necessitated doing that, just because of the amount of general fund revenues that we have collected. I would like to point out that this is the year that we, because we had a canal onto the page 3 of the general fund, transfers from the special revenue fund and canal dredging. Since we had a major project this year, those canal dredging funds reimburse the general fund for carrying those projects. This is the year of full reimbursement. Normally, whenever we just don't have a project, we budget for it. It's what actually occurs is if there are any expenses, there's a prorated expense that goes along with transfer to the general fund from canal dredging. But this year, was a full dredge project over $1 million, and so that the canal dredging, since it's self-supported, those transfers are reflected in the general fund from the canal dredging fund. This year's capital reserve funds, Fund 20, those, of course, have been established, and the amounts on the revenue side are significantly less than what we initially budgeted for, but that's a function of what the commissioners actually decided to charge for fees. That's Fund 20 and also Fund 40, which is the sewer side of the capital reserve funds, or the second piece of the water and sewer. That's Fund 40, and shows as page 6.
What page are you on now?
I'm on page 6. And that just shows that we've collected $20,000 or escrowed $20,000. I'll go back to page 5, which is the water and sewer operations account, Fund 30. The big thing in water and sewer this year is, of course, the facility upgrade at Lift Station 4. And if you go in and you compare the revenues collected, which showed about $2 million against the expenses incurred in Fund 30, just from looking at the actual expense lines in Fund 30, you're going to see that on an actual basis, it looks like that we spent more money than we took in. Technically, that's probably correct. However, our appropriated fund balance, that's a budgetary entry, and occurs when you close the books. So we're going to come out zero there when we make that entry, whatever the delta is. So we're okay there.
What's the total surplus, roughly?
There's not going to be a surplus. It'll come out to be zero when we balance it with the fund balance appropriation amount. But, if you're talking on the expense side for the water and sewer fund, let me get to it this year. We came in about just over $500,000 under on the budgeted, 10%. If you had a $5.5 million budget, and you came in at $500,000, we're about $500,000 under on our budget. So, were you talking about a capital project, Mark, or at a fund level?
At a fund level,
Okay, at a fund level, we're about $500,000 under on the fund level now. Is some of that, you have to go to the line items to see if, what proportion of that was operations or the capital project, because we actually run the capital project out of the water and sewer operations account. Fund 50, which is the Beach Park Access Recreation Tourism Fund. Our accommodations tax is, it appears that we've exceeded our revenue projections there by about $160,000. That's good. Our multi-year upward trend holds true. On the expense side, we had a flurry of action with getting funds over to the Corps of Engineers in time for them to supposedly be able to contract for the fall dredging of the Lockwood Folly Inlet Crossing project. That has been done and is reflected in this budget. So it looks like that we're about $130,000 under on the expense side and won't have to make any type of fund balance appropriation error.
David, on that fund total at the bottom,
On revenue or
On 50.
expense? Revenue
on
or
page
expense.
7, we show that we had a $6.5 million budgeted income, and we only took in less than 3, so $3.5 million shortfall. Has that got to do with, what does that have to do with, how did you end up?
It's primarily the FEMA reimbursements that have not come forth.
So we incurred the expenses, but we didn't get reimbursed?
Nope, didn't incur any expenses.
We did?
We did not incur the expenses.
No expenses, no reimbursement.
That's right. Let me flip to this. Let me flip to the expense side.
Look down the list of estimated revenue. The only thing that's anywhere in the millions is a fund balance appropriated.
You have to remember, John, that there was a $3 million transfer over to the capital reserve account also.
Which was in the budget. And, but how does that, what fund balance of $3.6 million did we anticipate would be done as revenue to the thing, and we didn't do it?
That's
That's the transfer.
That's the transfer from the B Part fund to the capital reserve account.
And but you did do that.
Yes,
That's Fund 90.
it's Fund 90.
But that wouldn't be
Remember-
Fund 50 getting $3.5 million, that would be Fund 50
Rem-
transferring it.
Remember, fund balance appropriations are year-end budgetary transactions. That $3 million will not show here until we close the books. This budget to actual is not a closure of the books. So,
But these are for Fund 50 now, not for 90, right?
yes, but you still have to appropriate the money in 50 before, you can go ahead and transfer it, but the appropriation of the funds is a year-end budgetary action that will show here. So there's $3 million of that 6 that's coming from your B Part savings, if you will, that's been escrowed over in the Beach and Inlet Reserve Fund.
But it's actually been put there, actually there, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. But we just haven't done the budgetary action here to reflect that. And then Fund 60, which is the canal dredging special project fund, that project is a resounding success, and those canals collectively are gonna end up with an escrowed amount of about $2 million between those 3 funds. That will be, I don't want to say left over, but it's the equivalent of their fund balances that will have them staged and ready should they, have a...
They're disproportionate amongst the 3.
Well, that reflects the strategies of each one of those canal subdivisions in how they want to position themselves for the future.
Future inevitable.
So does the town have any control over these decisions here, or was that strictly the different POAs that do that?
Yeah.
I'm asking David.
The Board of Commissioners maintains budgetary control, but has acted in accordance with the wishes of those subdivisions over the last several years since I've been here, and it's worked very
So
well.
this increase or decrease here was one that they made, not you, something you made?
No, that is strictly based on the canal working group's opinion and how they would like to position themselves going forward. But the Board of Commissioners always maintains budgetary control. You know, the suggestions that come forth through the budget message, you know, those well up from interaction with each one of those subdivisions, but, and to also reflect what they want to be assessed, which is the revenue side. But the commissioners could always go, we're not going to assess you, even though they've asked to be assessed,
Okay.
or we don't want to be assessed, and the commissioners say, well, we're going to assess you. So the commissioners will always have taxing and budgetary control.
And this increase on the HA interest from 300 budget to 7.6 thousand, is that part of that process you went through to reinvest money?
Yes, sir, and I cannot take credit for that. That actual across all of the town funds, general fund, water fund, beach funds, all of those have been the beneficiaries from Mr. Tyner's assistance in helping us structure what in getting the right Goldilocks spot in terms of what our cash flows versus our investable cash. Plus, I mean, the economy's doing a bit better, but I can't take credit for
So
that.
we'll see this anywhere you were investing money that's invested differently this year
Well, we hope
than you
so.
budgeted for.
We hope so. And what we also try to do is we do not try to budget interest just because of the volatility
Of interest
of
rate.
that. I mean, that's a conservative measure, and I can probably critique on that as well, but we've chosen not to budget interest just for one reason. We haven't had any reason to budget interest for a long time. Other than that, that's, let's see, Fund 90. And that's where the money shows for the beach and inlet reserve fund. And again, monies cannot be spent directly, even though there's an expense line for Fund 90. Monies cannot be expensed from Fund 90 because of the nature of 159's control over capital reserve funds. So any expenses of those monies would be really transferred
The board
back
would
to
have to approve
to the
transferring.
operational account and then subsequently expended from there. So, I know that's kind of a quick and dirty windshield tour of it, but that's about the size of it.
So when I look at 10's expenses and compare the fact that you had, what, 230,000 additional revenue and 227,000 less in expenses, for a total of about $457,000 plus in Fund 10. Seems about right. So that just, how much will that change the ratio, the fund ratio for 10?
Well, I was pretty conservative in the briefing to the commissioners that would go up in the 65% range. It'll probably be more.
I mean, it's a pretty significant amount. So I saw we got quoted in the local newspaper that our objective was 25%. I don't know where that came from, but
That's dated information. It's incorrect. They got a new report.
Anybody else questions on the,
Well, these are year end, is that right? So this is what goes to the auditor for the upcoming new law. And then they make adjustments to these numbers?
Well, we have to go through a process of striking the trial balance, and the trial balance is what we go to the auditor. We've not begun that process yet.
Okay, but last year's, we sent numbers like this. I'm just curious what the extent of adjustments that they made to these numbers coming into the audit, you know, what's in the audit now or will be in the audit.
I'd have to go back and look at that, Tom. Inevitably, there are errors, omissions, adjustments that have to be made. But
We don't know what they were for last year, or we do know what they were?
I don't know what they are off the top of my head.
Not these, but last year's.
I certainly don't know off the top of my head what they are.
last year was something in the $2 million bracket?
But,
2 million plus or minus?
yeah, but some of those are total fund adjustments because of the way we bring forward and put back, especially with the canal dredging subdivision. So,
But the previous year was 21 million.
21.
So the 17.
That's our whole budget, isn't it?
Well, we had a number of years we had not made the adjustments, and we had to make them.
Okay. These are the adjusting entries the auditor submits to be made.
no, these are not adjusting entries, Tom. This is the end of year budget to actual numbers. It's straight up raw budgetary information is what is presented to you right now.
So,
And these are strictly cash based, right?
This is strictly cash.
This is a cash basis, not a modified accrual, so no depreciation would have been done yet. It's done at the end of the year.
Strictly cash.
Typical company, typical town.
That's right.
How long does the process normally take for you to generate a trial balance? In other words, what's the soonest an auditor would have access to your trial balance? What's it be? Month, 2 months?
You usually can give them one as soon as you know who your auditor's gonna be, and then as you make entries and change things, you just send updated ones all along through the process. So,
So that's still a good question. So David, about how long would it normally take you to do all what you need to do at the end of the year and get it as clean as you can get it to hand over to an auditor?
6 weeks would be a minimum time.
6 weeks.
But it's a trial balance, and until there's some back and forth with the auditor, I mean, it wouldn't be finalized for several months.
Oh, no, but
6 weeks.
to hand them a trial balance that has the accruals all in it and the depreciation schedules in it and those kind of things, about 6 weeks.
so last year, I mean, it hit right with the hurricanes, and that was what I was hearing, I think, was the auditor did not get the trial balance because Florence and
July, August, the end of August, right? You had it before the end of August?
Well, you gotta bring in there also that it was a new auditor that had been selected too, so they hadn't onboarded with us either.
well, but this is from you to them. This is a trial balance you give them, right? It's not on their side.
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
6 weeks.
I'm
Okay,
not
we've
following the
got,
question.
okay, we've got the numbers now, but these are raw numbers, just right out of the general ledger printed. You're gonna create a trial balance.
That's correct.
It's gonna take you 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna give it to the auditor.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's all on your side, our side.
That's correct.
Okay. So it doesn't have anything to do with who that auditor is at this point.
Correct.
Okay. That was my question. So did that happen before Florence or after Florence?
I'd have to go back and check. I really don't recall.
I think.
I mean, the question is that this audit is so late, unbelievably late, and part of what I heard was,
Well, are we
Florence
gonna
impacted.
talk about audit here on these
Going
budget items,
forward
or are
for-
we gonna talk about something else?
for this one now, 6 weeks from now, there'll be a trial balance that will be in a position to give to the auditor. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Whoever the auditor is.
Are we talking about the end of year, these budget actual numbers here, or how the audit process is gonna work?
Well, I'm trying to understand both, because I sure would like to have a finished audit by October 1st.
I guess what he's saying is this is on our agenda as one of the future items, and we're sort of drifting away from this topic.
Well,
So
yeah,
I
I-
started that up.
All right, I'm just trying to figure out next steps from here, because these numbers will not show up on the audit. I mean, this is end of year numbers, but they're not gonna be the numbers that show up on the audit, because they'll be adjusted. Is that fair? Okay.
Any other questions on the financials? Woody?
No, sir. Good. Right now, I'm good.
Tom?
I'm good.
Tony, any questions on the financials themselves? Mark?
Oh,
Okay. Okay. We'll go with that. We at the last meeting asked Member Shaloni and to put together some ideas, and you brought something with you. Did you put materials in the bid number 5 to you then?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity. So after the last few meetings, when we have a 27-page financial statement, you kind of take pot shots at what it might say. We wanted to look for some tools that perhaps would help staff and this committee in focus the questions. So I took a stab at putting 2 different reports for you to look at today. This is through 11 months. This would be based on the last statement that I had at the time, which was the November statement. The first one has statement of funds for the fiscal year comparison, 11 months. And that will compare by fund the period of time through those 11 months, actual versus the budget. And then it would also compare that with the same thing last year. So that way you're able to see, well, how are we doing versus what we thought we would do as reflected in the budget, and how are we doing compared to what happened this time last year. In some cases, that the seasonality kind of helps explain that, especially as you get late in the year. They kind of have a tendency to even themselves out, but they are certainly do vary month to month. So the first 3 columns there will be through November. This would basically be a summary of the standard reports that staff issues every month. And this is broken down by the funds. So you can kind of see general fund number 10 on the revenue side and general fund number 10 on the expenditure side. And then the right-hand side of that, it would be the same period last year. So that would have been 11 months through last fiscal year.
Tony, when you annualized, did you just do like 12, 11 in this case, or did you?
Now, this is the way the city, the way the town presents theirs, they just show the entire budget. So the next one that we did is annualized, the second page.
Okay.
So this is actually
That's what I
comparing
was
against,
next page.
yeah, it's comparing against the full budget as these statements are.
Okay.
So one of the ideas we had also had was, perhaps if each one of the members of the committee wanted to say, well, I really want to really get up to speed on one of the particular funds and do a deep dive in it, so that we're not all having to do deep dives in all the funds. It might be a way to do it. I guess that's one suggestion. And then also you can kind of see when you compare the revenue and expenses, how each individual fund is doing, and the general fund being the largest. You see, you can easily identify the revenues that came in for that fund against the budget, same period last year, and the expenses that would have come in for that fund. And hopefully this will give you some tools to kind of focus down and say, well, one of these lines looks really out, and let me get back into the 27 pages financial statements, and maybe I can find the 1 or 2 line items that might be attributed to that. So that's one document. And then the other one that I presented for your review was one that's kind of annualized. We don't have a monthly budget, but this is, to your question, this is if we took 11/12 of the budget, straight line, That's what this will compare to. So again, this is in the November actual numbers against 11 months of the year. So certainly by the time you're getting near the end of the year, 11 months into it, if you saw significant variances, that would be the things you start to at least ask some questions about. So I think one of the ones I wanted to call your attention to, Mr. Chairman, was that question about moving funds in one of the, out of the beach renourishment. If you see on the second page of that one, then we're under, we haven't really moved any money yet. There's $3 million in the budget to move. And then that is the number that would end up helping explain your number 50 on your revenue side, which is about $3 million under where it should be at this time. So if you can kind of look at those things and see a big delta on the revenue side, you can look over the print side and say, well, we just haven't moved that money yet. That's something they do at the end of the year as an example. So I've set these up that all we really would do on a monthly basis is drop in the actual financial results for that month and everything. These reports just automatically generate. I've got all of last year's in there, so I would just drop those in as they're presented by staff and give them to David for him to look at. And before.
Was this created, did you create this file manually?
Yeah.
Did you just take numbers and rekey them?
Well, I have all the financial statements in a big Excel spreadsheet.
That you got
for
from
the last 2
town?
years.
From the town?
I just built it. So then, and you have the last 2 years in there. So these are the summary statements that come off that big worksheet.
But that big worksheet would generate off the financial?
Yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so then you just created,
Yeah.
So rather than focusing on the 35-page schedule of cash flow with all the details, this will just highlight.
Yeah, I
The
think it
overall
gives
picture, the
you
big
a
picture.
tool, the combination of both of those gives you a tool to be able to say, well, this is, I have questions about one that really looks like it's way out.
Should draw your attention
If I'm
to.
about 100% of the general fund, and I'm 11 months through the year, there's probably not as many questions would be generated, or if you've had one that you were, 40% of the general, 40% of your budget at 11 months, you want to understand that.
no. If in that file, the town added an account somewhere,
Yeah.
would that affect your template? Would you have to modify it?
Yeah. And we did budget adjustments do that as well, because you have starting your budget, and then during the year, David, you'll probably make 4 or 5 budget adjustments, so that kind of moves it around some too.
That's good.
Yeah, but it's not, plug and play, but it takes probably about 20 minutes. It's not a complicated deal. But obviously, we would only want to do it if we found value in it, if this is a tool that helps you focus your questions on certain areas as we go through the year.
Well, I see this not waiting to the 11th month to draw our attention, but
Yeah.
3rd and 4th month.
Yeah, we'd be doing whatever
If
cycle.
we're missing
we
it by a
met.
significant percentage,
Yeah.
we have.
Especially the annualized one, and, I think ideally, I don't think this will really ever happen, but, if you ever had a kind of a monthly budget, then you take your seasonality into consideration, and then your budget report actually becomes even more valuable because you're comparing against what's really going to happen versus 1/12 of it, but an annualized one is kind of the best stab at it.
Hey, Tony, a couple questions.
Mhm.
Just make sure I'm following your verbiage. When you say budget annualized, that's an annual budget number, right? It's not something you had to annualize.
No, but on your second report there, the one that says actual versus the annualized budget, so that annualized budget reflects the number of months that this statement does. So it is converted to 11/12.
It could be miscalculated if there is a significant saving,
Yeah.
like revenue collection.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so
taxes.
I'm
So
sorry.
that would be a risky
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
interpretation.
It's assuming everything's spread over 12 months. So-
Equal.
so
That's why I'm
this
saying
is-
it would really be better, not that I'm advocating this because this would be a lot of work, but it'd be better work in a business.
Yes.
You would budget each individual month and you would build in your seasonality, like your collections over it, and then you would be comparing yourself against that, and it would take all that kind of confusion out, but this is purely annualized, equal 12 months.
So let me just confirm what you said. On page, I'm looking at page 30, which am I supposed to be looking at the handout we got or page 30? Well, I got this handout
The
too.
handout puts the columns.
Well, the number, yeah, it's got
Yeah, that's what I thought.
it's got the variances on the right-hand
Yeah.
side, what they, that's
So,
what
so
printed here.
the budget you're showing here is 11/12 of the budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That 3 million example you went through a while ago with the bid, will you do that again? I did not follow what you said.
So the question came up when we were looking at the year-end financial statements. It appeared that one of the fund's revenues was significantly under
Yes.
what we budgeted, even on the year-end report that David reported, that we don't actually do that till basically after the year. So in looking at this report, the one you're looking at, that would have come up had we looked at this because we'd have seen that Fund 50 on the revenue side at $2.6 million compared to 5.6. Gosh, that's exactly what he picked out. And then on the other side, you'd be looking, and when you look over at the next page, on page 9, on Fund 90, on the revenues, on the expense side, and you see we had a budget of basically $3 million, and we haven't expended any of that yet. And that is the other side, and that is what David was explaining, that's why that showed up as a
Yeah,
question.
I got you.
This might help us kind of understand some of that flow. But again, it's at the fund level, and if you see variances that intrigue you, that you have questions, then you would go to the more lengthy report and look at the various accounts inside the fund to say, why is this revenue higher or expense lower, whatever.
Yeah, and is there any annualized, some of the things you've kind of got a good sense of,
Yeah.
you know, taxes get sent out and they get brought back
That's the
within a
biggest
few
one.
months.
That's
So you
right.
don't see them the other months, a little flow.
Yeah.
The rental income,
Yeah.
comes only during the rental season, and follows, you know, month by month after that. So some things, and David can tell you which ones they are that have trends, that they tend to up, and sometimes they offset, sometimes they don't. And then the good point is that even after the end of the year, when we get this statement, there's a lot of changes that have to be made. This calculations have to be done, depreciation has to be done.
Well, you see the same thing, the seasonality impacts water and sewer too, because of
The usage,
the usage there, goes way
Well,
up. You know,
we
like,
put-
we ran $1.3 million through the water system yesterday, so.
Well, we saw it in the cash flow charts we put
Right.
together. I mean,
That's
I
right.
think it does lie out all the time. Is there any value in taking the revenues and netting the expenses out to see the, I mean, I don't
In
see
the
that,
fund?
I don't see that here.
Yeah, no, that would be, that'd be
just do the profit and loss
Yeah.
as you go along.
Surplus deficit kind of thing.
by the fund.
At a macro level,
Mhm.
at a
Yeah.
total level, yeah.
That'd be easy enough.
Well, I'd do it at each fund level.
Yeah, 'cause some of these are business enterprise funds versus general funds.
Yeah, right.
I think it's great, you know, to me, to get away, we're out of the weeds,
Yeah.
kind of into a level where.
But the weeds are there if you want to get in them.
Yeah.
Maybe at least get you
It is.
down in the right yard.
Yeah, I mean, these are fine. I've gotten used to looking at the detailed reports and just going to the bottom line.
Yeah.
I don't even look at the upper unless there's something that draws my attention.
No, I think it's a great report. I mean, the other item which I continue to get hung up on is, you know, we've got such a split. We've got police and sanitation, and you know, it's in 10 and it's also in B part, and it's hard to, you know, how much is police? And I don't know if there's logic to how that gets distributed out. You know, the admin, the operations, public works, sanitation, all those police, ranger, you know, there's what I would consider general fund expenses in B part. I know the logic behind that, but it's hard to get your arms around the total police budget or the total sanitation budget or the total administration budget. And it's nothing to do with the report, it's just the way the accounts are structured.
Well, I'll throw out for consideration, I was not able to do this because it's a little more complicated the way they're presented, but if you look at the account numbering system,
Yep.
after the first two digits are the fund, and then the subsequent digits are speak to specific accounts. So all salaries have the same three digits.
So you could pull it together.
If all of them follow it consistently,
Yep.
and they don't, unfortunately, but, because there's a lot of accounts, but, and that's what I wanted to do, because I think that'd be a very valuable, at least on our expenses, to be a very valuable, to put all your overtime, all your FICA,
Yep.
you know, against, budget. But once you get past the major accounts like salaries and payroll taxes, and then, that numbering system's not exactly consistent, so you're adding some things that don't necessarily marry up. So it takes a little bit of work on the
So
town.
how
It
would
takes
you-
some, it takes
Just say
some
you
work.
wanted to reconstruct a total police department budget irrespective of the fund, is that doable? Or is it, what would preclude it from?
Well, from the town standpoint, and I'm not advocating this, I'm just talking out loud here. So, the town standpoint, again, the salaries, they're pretty consistently in the same subcategory,
Yep.
sub-account. But when you get down to other expenses, they're not necessarily, they've been kind of commingled.
Yep.
So if you wanted to run all of the
Pensions.
maintenance, which I don't know that number, let's just say it's 600, and you were to run all your 600, it's easy enough to do, you know, with an Excel spreadsheet, but it's
Yep,
pretty
yep,
easy.
yep.
All the 600s are not maintenance.
Okay.
And maintenance might be in a 640 somewhere
Yeah.
or something. It's just not.
The account coding structure is not consistent.
Not consistent.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as over time accounts get added, you know, just.
No, yeah.
So it would take kind of a restructure of the account numbers to get it aligned the way we would like
yeah.
to pull it off. But I think it'd be a valuable.
Because once you did it, boy, you could
Yeah.
slice and dice
Big time.
like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not only that, but I could answer the question that I get most often, is what's the town's budget for running the town?
Yeah.
Forget all
Yeah.
the water and sewer and all that, just what's it cost us, if we didn't have B Park, what's our bill? And it's hard for me to tell
Yep.
people that.
I think it'd be great to walk in here and have a report that says, okay, our overtime through all funds
Yeah.
over the last 6 months was X
Pension
dollars.
costs,
Pension,
healthcare costs.
whatever. I think that'd be a valuable tool for us to have just as oversight.
I absolutely agree. And I know
Well,
we've discussed
I-
it before, and I don't know, you know, there's two pieces. You know, first is just getting it in Excel,
Yeah,
so you don't have to
we're there.
rekey off a PDF. And then the second is getting the consistent account structure so that you can do it.
And that's what the, you know, the way the account structure is set up, it is set up to provide that.
Yeah.
It's just not exactly, it's not as clean as it needs to be in order to really do it yet. But that's what, those numbers would allow you to slice and dice down to that micro level.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't necessarily have to do all the accounts. I bet 5 accounts make up 80% of your budget.
Yeah.
So if you did salaries and overtime and. a
Well,
few more-
if you'd like, before we meet again, let me show you the ones that do match up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be that those would be the key indicators you have an interest in tracking. And if there are others that perhaps don't, and we might be working those areas. How about that?
Well,
Sounds
David,
good.
David, you already do now, all of these statements can be in Excel, right?
Oh, yeah.
So David could give you the Excel, but then you have to do the formulas for your own Excel, that sort of thing. He'll do the Excel.
But that's a one-shot deal. Once you set that up, you just drop in the new number.
David, is this the first you've seen of this?
I mean, I saw when Mr. Shivani submitted, you know, before the agenda package, yes.
Okay, you have comments on it,
think it's great.
response, or?
Just, I mean, yeah, I see the value in this. It's just that anything that the board, the audit committee would wish to set forth should be aligned with what the Board of Commissioners would like to see. Remember, that's what, if we're going to create a product, the Board of Commissioners needs to, it needs to be what they wish to see, is my perspective on it. So just because it's nifty and neat to me doesn't necessarily mean that, that the Board of Commissioners would find utility in it. I'm not throwing a wet blanket on anything, but remember the function of the audit committee is to assist the Board of Commissioners in their oversight. And if this is what, you know, is put forth, I think that there should be an acknowledgement or sign off that this is what the commissioners wish to see.
Well, I think that may work, but on the other hand, it may be that the commissioners in total don't want to see certain things, and they've put together an audit committee of accountants and whatever, they can do it for them, and they can give them, because they get the same financials everybody gets.
Well, I
But
mean,
again, that's easy enough to settle with the board, we just if the board,
If we suggested that this was a tool that we would use to fulfill our mission as a board.
we would recommend it to the board, then
Yeah.
if the board approves it, then it's done.
I think there's also a question on kind of the schedule of, when we meet and what quarters you would want to review. It takes a little while to kind of pull this together, so, if we're gonna meet on July the 5th, and the statements, this is pretty quick for them to get the June ones out, but obviously we wouldn't be seeing June ones on July the 5th typically. So you might, if you're happy with us, with our normal, current meeting schedule, recognizing the statements are gonna kind of be at least 1 month in arrears, does that make sense? We're looking at May right now versus,
No, I can,
we just looked at June, or we can move our meetings to be
Move the
consistent on the
meetings so
quarter.
we can more accommodate.
yeah.
Quarterly
Yeah.
basis, yeah.
Give you time to do it.
Yeah. I think a quarterly, reporting and us moving our meetings to,
Now,
do that.
now, David, I know, sometime in the past, you were talking about looking at different financial reporting systems. Is that still, and are you gonna be, is this system you're currently using, gonna be in use for the foreseeable future?
We didn't budget any money to buy new software this year.
Okay.
That's probably a $30,000-$40,000 proposition.
That's fine.
But we haven't budgeted anything for that.
But even this probably has some sort of report writing features with it,
Yeah.
or is it mostly an Excel template kind of thing?
I mean, it's got some report writing capabilities, but we haven't explored that in terms of what type of reports.
You can link all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, these numbers are just a roll-up of these numbers, so if this software's got the ability to roll it out, why duplicate the effort?
But the, all of these local government softwares are pretty much the same thing. I mean, it's fund accounting, and, it's pretty much the same thing. There are newer, more app configured type visuals, but they're pretty much very similar.
And so does going to an accrual accounting system versus cash accounting, does the microfund support that with no problem, or is it an issue with microfund?
It's not an issue with microphone.
Okay.
It's just a couple more entries, right?
Typically, you have to integrate like an accounts payable.
Well, you'd have to make the accruals and record them, but it's just additional transactions, it's not a new reporting.
Do the auditors have different auditors have a software package that's applicable to municipal accounting that might be better than what we have, or do you know, David, what they use?
I don't. Margaret, you got any?
I think it would be more along the purposes of what they
I'll
do
go here.
than what we use.
I can't hear you.
Their software is probably built for auditing purposes compared to ours.
Okay, so, any more input on this before we ask the question, do we want to propose this to the board? Recommend to the board? You ready to vote, or?
I don't have more questions, if that's what you're asking.
I move we accept it and propose it.
Since ultimately, clearly I don't think we want to create a document for ourselves different than the commissioners would prefer to see. I think we submit this as a preliminary outline of a format that could be submitted periodically, whether they want it monthly or quarterly, could be up.
Well, it's what the audit committee is asking for them to do, so we can do our job, which is working for the board. So you put this together so that we can make a better job at evaluating the financials and giving the feedback to the board. If the board would approve this, then they would also get it. They could have it as well. I mean, we wouldn't be the only ones that would have it. The board
This would be then quarterly is what, as that's how we're currently scheduled.
You could do it anyway, but quarterly would, since we have quarterly meetings, quarterly would seem to be the right initial setup. So, you
The
made a
only-
motion?
Well, hang on, the only suggestion I made earlier was, would it be any benefit to seeing the revenues and expenses netted?
I'll have those, yeah. I have summarized by fund balance.
Okay.
I'll do that. And I'll give you this list of these line item functional expenses where
Okay,
the
so
ones
you
that
go
we
ahead
can
and
do. Yeah, and you can tell me if you want to do those.
Okay.
And the only other question would be what schedule, calendar schedule you need prepared.
May I ask a question? I've missed it typing, but I know that you're going to send it to the board after you vote, whatever you vote on. Did you mention who would be actually putting these reports together each time? Is that staff duty, or
No,
is
I'll
that
continue
the
I'll
audit
continue to do
committee's duty with the information that you get from our system?
Well, I think that that's really a staff job to prepare the documents. We can use the template that y'all drafted, but provide the information is responsibility of the finance officer.
Well, I would make the argument that for giving me a 27-page financial statement is providing the information I need to analyze it, and if I decide to analyze it in a certain way, then that's my purview.
But then that's going to be an audit committee document that goes to the board of commissioners and not a staff document at that point in time.
It's an audit committee tool to do our job, to analyze these reports, to make an assessment to present to the board, is how I see it. It's a tool that we need to do our job.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. It's a tool we need to do our job. I think it'd be more appropriate for the staff to generate a report and hand it to us, as opposed to an audit committee member generating the report.
What I'm hearing is he has a report he needs to populate his tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't understand.
I guess there's always the risk of these documents presenting information that contradicts one another, and then who owns the errors? I mean,
Public information.
ultimately, I mean, if he's gonna generate it, if it's gonna be presented to the board, it probably needs to be cycled back and it'll be verified as to its, they put their own stamp on the stamp of approval, whether that's regenerate.
Make sure it's accurate. I mean, I'm just trying to save someone the time of doing it. If someone else
I
can
mean-
do it, that's fine, but I'm more than happy to do it, and would be happy to give it to staff and let them, it doesn't take 20 minutes to put it in, or maybe
I think
it might take longer for someone who's not familiar with the spreadsheet, obviously.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
We're currently under the precedent of more or less agreeing over our past many audits that the final report has been presented with the assistance of outsiders in the document to make their final entries that go into the report. So granted, that gets kicked back to you for your review and challenge, so we're getting assistance.
Make no mistake, I got no problem with help, with administrative help, to do that, but I see it as a staff function. But to be sure, yes, sir, we'll be glad to let you help us do that. No
Let me
problem
do it
at all.
and give it.
How about if he doesn't, how about,
I got no problem with
If they
that.
give it-
It's
if
just
you
a
give the format-
responsibility for the product.
you validate the format,
That's
and then, okay? So we recommend to the board that this is the process. We're gonna put together the format, give it to David. David will be the one responsible for putting the reports, because they become formal, they become public information here.
Yeah.
And it's a board-related thing, so it's better probably if the finance director is the one who's overseeing it and it's putting the stamp on, this is legitimate. That's fine.
Just build that into our reporting schedule.
Exactly,
So we have
and
enough
then-
time to pull that together.
And we can talk about whether we need to change the months that we're looking at, which quarter we're looking at. That would take a change in the audit committee charter in terms of the work.
Well, I wasn't.
The charter just reads quarterly, John. I don't think it states.
No,
But
but we
We
Well, I don't even think we have a charter, we just have an ordinance.
Excuse me.
So we have to change the ordinance,
We
but it's
agree
quarterly.
dates, But we can change the dates.
just amend it to specify a particular
Right.
second Thursday or something, like that.
But for Heather, we've given her a schedule of dates, which we're expected to do as to when we're gonna meet, and we've published that. It's a published statement. We could change that and then republish the statement, or republish the schedule.
Yeah, y'all need to give some thought to that though, and we also need to think about the staff schedule too
Exactly.
on that.
And when can staff do it? Yeah, how long would it take staff to do this? And
But generally speaking, we do need some lag time in order to prepare that report.
I mean, 3 business days wasn't sufficient.
Well, but there's also the administrative time involved in preparing the agenda packages and
right,
that kind
double
of thing.
package it.
Yeah.
So if we rolled it a month, just thinking off the top of my head, and we made an August, this committee made an August, could we review the June statements at the August audit committee meeting? David, is that too tight?
Yes, that would probably be good, but we need to deconflict availabilities for that. If basically what you're really talking about is just rolling the regularly scheduled meetings a month
Yeah.
forward.
And then reporting on the calendar quarter, our fiscal quarter,
Yeah,
and then rolling this meeting a month in order to do that.
yeah, and that
Or if
would,
this meeting needed to move later in the month, I mean, I don't know, you have all the flexibility in the world.
Oh, we have
I mean,
flexibility.
the first Friday might be too quick.
Your dates, that was,
Yeah, I
when
mean-
you're available.
You know,
yeah, and,
Yeah, I mean, the reports come out, I mean, we got the June 30th numbers, this is July 5th, so it's how long it takes to,
This was a little earlier than, this seemed to be pretty early, but do you normally get them out this early? To have the June statements on July 5th?
well, I mean, I can run the,
Anytime.
any, in real time.
Okay.
So, you know, what I usually try to do is the next working day after the end of the month. I try to, you know, just run raw dog numbers and.
At what time during the month do you kind of feel like I'm pretty close? Is it halfway through the month, or, I know it can move all the time.
You know, it depends.
Depends on.
But the reality is, do you do post-closing entries interim in the year?
We do.
Yeah.
You do go back and make numbers, okay.
But, I mean, that's just the nature of the
You can't
business,
get away
but,
from that. Well, obviously, any, you know, analytics we do will be more accurate based on how accurate the raw data is. So
yeah.
you can
If,
get
if,
as close to being a good picture as possible.
if I may suggest, if what you're generally considering is rolling the schedule meeting, you know, forward or backwards a month, probably we need to solicit your calendar availability. But also, it's not just about the audit committee and the staff that's involved with that. It's other committees and boards that also meet during the month. So we're gonna have to deconflict. It's kind of like a bowl of spaghetti. You know, you move one little noodle here, and 3 meatballs fall off the table. So we need to look at that.
That's good, not only that we might look at the end of year and not expecting to do it 5 days after the end of the year because the trial balance hasn't been prepared yet.
It was a Wednesday,
We'd probably like to see the trial balance
Yeah.
with all the adjusting entries and everything proposed. So we would make the, not July, but August, probably an August meeting, middle of August, or when David thinks he would have the trial balance out. Whatever the auditor get, it would be good for the audit committee to look at and then feed the board as quick as we can what our position is on it. Okay, so we've got a motion and to submit this to the board for
to
approval.
accept, yeah, Tony's product and recommend
as
it.
he's gonna modify.
Do we have a second? We have a second on that motion?
Embellish.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Okay, we will do that. We will package it up that we can submit it, okay? Number 5, number 6 we took out, okay? Number 7 is schedule a meeting with Reeves partner Jay Sharp to discuss the audit.
We moved that one, we moved
You
that one.
flip-flop.
We flipped it, okay, good. So 8 is, Reeves, David, you want to tell what Reeves has done in terms of the audit contract?
The amended contract,
Yeah.
they had set forth basically that, they want $10,000 more in order to, the finished contract, I guess. The original contract was $14,000.
And 14,784.
Right.
And why they want the extra?
14,784. 14,784.
Yeah,
Wow.
and 27 cents.
Yes.
David, why they want the extra 10,000? I know it said for extra work, what's the extra work?
Audit firm had to perform additional work,
What was the additional work for?
assistance, referring to the material weakness noted in the audit report.
What?
You know,
We have the audit report.
I'll make a statement here. Over the course of the last 10 years, we've used various audit firms, and all of them have charged in the neighborhood of $12,000, $14,000, $15,000 over that period of time. And the preparation of the financial statements, all of them have assisted in the preparation of the financial statements. This year, or in 18, that $10,000 is basically because it's for the preparation of the financial statements, whereas the other firms did that, which is pretty much 95% of all local governments in North Carolina have the auditor prepare the financial statements. So that is something that they bought in early on and have come back to us with a bill. I would like to say that their contract also talks about additional work, and that any additional work is to be deconflicted prior to performing that work, and the contract amended accordingly. That wasn't done. I was not informed that we were going to be billed the extra money for the preparation of the financial statements prior to them being done.
I continue to not understand how an auditor can prepare financial statements and then turn around and attest and audit their own work. How is that allowed?
I can't answer that question. It's
Help me out here, but that violates every separation of duties, independence. You're auditing your own work. I don't get it.
I guess it would depend, is the auditor who's doing the audit work the one that prepares the financial statements? It might be the same firm, but it may be two different areas of the firm.
That doesn't count.
That doesn't count?
No,
What do you
it's
mean
the
doesn't count?
firm is putting its statement that they are a third-party attestation of that work, third party. So if you and I work for the same firm, we're one, I can't audit your work and say, no.
well, then
how can I audit?
then local government commission,
I-
95% of the local governments in North Carolina are
I'm
wrong.
amazed.
Well, I actually trying to get some education. I called the Cape Fear Council of Governments this week and asked them, and they even have their auditor prepare their financial
And
statement.
then audit their own work.
Careful. Prepare it or put it,
Put it, they said prepare, but I think they meant format.
So,
Yeah, they formatted it for them.
give, and the LGC has for years said, because towns are small and couldn't afford it,
That's right.
that if the auditor could show that a part of their firm did it separate from the firm that was doing the audit, and they could justify that, that's okay. And I think even when they got smaller, they even said, hey, it's too big, not that big a deal, so go ahead and do it. But as of now, the new view from the law that just got passed, and the LGC says, you don't want to do that. They don't want to see any more firms preparing the financials, which is not just putting the schedule together and typing them up, but it's actually going back and calculating what the accruals are, the deferrals are, that sort of thing. Doing a lot of the accounting work that could have been done by a town that had more trained staff.
And I'm sorry, did you say a law just got passed that changed that?
Yeah, and it's House Bill 422 or 423, something like that. And
Well-
the state auditor's gonna be active, the treasurer's gonna be active, and they're telling the new yellow book from the AICPA says you don't do that.
House Bill 233, John, doesn't address the manner in which the financial statements are prepared, nor the manner in which audits are performed. That is a recent memo from the Local Government Commission that details out how the protocols of audit performance versus the preparation of financial statements are to occur in the upcoming year for the audit for the year that closes out 30 June of 2020.
Well, can we get back to this, because there are other agenda items there that are going to cover some of these. We're talking about this amendment. I guess the very first topic here is to discuss the proposed amendment, and I don't know that this is a subject that this committee can deal. I guess we could offer a recommended course, but this is a commissioner town decision as far as I'm concerned. I guess in the course of any kind of service provider where you're under contract, that any amendment has to be submitted prior to the performance of additional work and not retrospective is puts this in I don't know how supportable it is other than
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know when, I mean, this first we've seen, but, you know, was there no prior notice to anybody within the town that additional work was going to be, you know, there's a history here that I think we're not aware of. So, is this the first notification there was going to be additional work? Or
I've received, with the transmission of the audit, an amended contract set forth. I don't have the authority to amend this contract. The contract is between the Board of Commissioners and the audit firm, overseen by the Local Government Commission, because the amended contract has to be approved by the Local Government Commission before they can be paid. Right. As well as the original contract has to be approved by the Local Government Commission.
David, when you gave the trial balance to the auditor late August, did the auditor not say anything that the trial balance did not include the accrued revenue and expenses?
That was not communicated to me.
But you knew that you didn't have it, right?
Didn't have one.
That they didn't have those accruals. The trial balance didn't include the accruals at the end of the year.
We gave them what we had, John.
You gave what you had, but it did not include the accruals, am I correct?
Every account should be.
The accounts payable, accounts receivable, everything up to date, all of them done?
In the trial balance.
Now, was it a function of we provided information to them and a couple of weeks went by that was not acknowledged that they had? I don't know. We went back and forth several times with the audit firm on providing information to them.
I think I'll get back to your point. What's our role? You know, I don't understand what our responsibilities are.
Well, I mean, I think Mark's right. This is a contractual issue
Yeah,
between the audit firm and the Board of Commissioners.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't make me feel real good if the facts are what the facts are here, and that they did the work, didn't tell us about it, and came back and said, give us $10,000. I'm like, okay, I don't want to pick them for an auditor the next time.
And do we know all the facts?
I don't know.
To me, until we talk to them and hear their side of everything, I am very worried we'll make an uninformed decision, a misinformed decision.
Yeah, well, I
We need to
agree.
hear both sides.
But if the facts are what the facts are, this doesn't make me feel good.
Yeah,
If that's the way it works out, I agree. But
I'd also prefer
we have very limited facts.
to defer until the
Yeah,
the audit partner has come and had a chance to explain. the other-
To me, we've got to hear their side. I don't know how else. I mean, we're hearing, we owe it to them.
Well, I mean, item 4 in the ordinance, it says that y'all were supposed to evaluate the performance of the audit firm as it relates to the annual audit.
Right. And I think what we're saying is we don't have enough information to do that at this point, because we don't, yeah.
So you have a motion on the floor
I don't,
To do it, so do you want to withdraw the motion?
I didn't motion, I didn't make a motion.
Was there a motion made
To do what?
to approve this?
No, no, no.
So we just take this off,
The
take
other-
no action on it?
The other item I want to point out is there's not $10,000 in the budget to pay these guys either. There was not a.
That would definitely not be in our purview, right? We do not mess with the budget, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And we only recommend, we don't decide.
I think I've been slapped on that one before.
And John, I don't know if I'm walking all over your agenda here, but relative to that discussion is the, I'm sorry, I'll let you go.
I'd like to add something, because Chairman, I think everybody got this, I know we got this at one of our earlier meetings, this is the
Yep.
internal control report.
Yep.
And I think there's consistent messaging in there, and possibly we're seeing part of it reflected in this year's audit, but they're saying the changes that are going on in the government is gonna disallow these outside auditors from continuing to do the financial statements, or doing the CAF run, that ultimately our staff has got to be able to do more of that internally, especially the CAF, you certainly can't audit that, that's gotta be prepared, I think, by the local entity. So I think we're seeing these consistent messages, and this might be the most recent consistent message, in that we have to be able to prepare more with our staff and rely less on objective auditors to do them, because they're not gonna be allowed to do them anymore.
Well, it's
I
kind of a
absolutely agree, and I also think that any new auditor walking into a new client, new engagement's got some learning and ramp up, and we're seeing that too. You know, there's inefficiencies your very first time, your second, third, fourth time doing it, you're very efficient, but I think we've got, I mean,
While that sounds good, and I think the LGC and the new will probably agree, we might not be able to afford to have that, but we might be able to afford to hire an outsider separate from the audit firm. And David has already done that. Am I correct, David?
Yes, sir, we're leaning forward into that and making provisions to not only train up on the preparation of the CAFR, but also for assistance with the actual doing of the work.
And
Which, oh, by the way, the new law actually provides for that.
So you're talking about this trial balance that's presented to the final audit firm would have
It's
advice
actually-
from another third
It's
party.
actually a third party. That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Would be preparing that.
is it a compilation firm then? Or is it really a third-party firm? Or is it a resource that's going to be added to staff that's going to do it?
I'm sorry, Tom.
Is it a third-party firm that's going to do the compilation?
Third party.
Okay, so we'll take this data that we were given, end of year numbers, give that to a third party, they will compile, do some entries, and they will create the trial balance and hand that over to,
As the initial foray into being able to establish that capability in-house, that is correct.
and that's gonna happen
It's already,
this year,
it's
June
already-
19.
it's
but
already happening. We're in the process of doing that.
Who's the firm?
It is the former finance officer for Brunswick County, is Lydia Brooks.
She retired, and she retired.
And so you've already reported that, in fact, you already have all of the accounting done now for the two major funds, for the, an accrual, full accrual, and the rest in the modified accrual?
Right now, we're still in cash basis, John. We haven't done any of that work yet, but that's what we will be doing over the next 6 weeks, is to bring those forward as trial balance.
So this year's have not been done that way yet? Because I understood when I read the audit report draft that in fact it was already in place. The wording was that you were already maintaining,
Well, the draft was for 2018. I mean, that was the look back on.
but the response that you put in there
Right.
was that you were doing it now.
So
For future.
No, because it was being done currently. That's what the response said. And I just wondered if it was
What response?
To the
Audit
to the
response.
audit report that went in.
Okay. Were we given the audit report, is it just me, or where's the audit? It's been submitted, right? Have you guys got it? I haven't got it.
It went to a draft went to the vote.
It was in the packet of the board of commissioners.
For the June one?
Yep.
Yeah,
What's wrong?
the draft was. It wasn't the final, it's not the final report, it's the draft.
The draft of the June 18th Board of Commissioner meeting packet,
Right.
the audit report was in there.
Which, oh, by the way, the local government commissions bounced it.
Yeah, what can you share?
I can read you the letter from the local government commission. But again, John,
Yeah.
I'm walking over
Oh,
your
you can
agenda.
walk over me. I've been walked over before.
David, while you're looking at it, David, does the LGC have to approve the audit before it goes to the Board of Commissioners?
The Board of Commissioners is supposed to approve it before it
It
goes
goes
to
in.
them.
Well, I can just tell you what is in the approved contract from the local government commission that prescribes how the auditors is supposed to perform and submit the audit. It doesn't say, it doesn't qualify that one gets it before the other. So which question would you like me to answer first?
I just want to understand the process. I mean, does it go to LGC and the Board of Commissioners? Does it go to both at the same time?
I have two documents that I can read for you.
The letter first, and then it's.
Yeah, this is from Danny Nobles, financial reviewer, North Carolina State Treasurer's Office, and Manasa Cooper, compliance reviewer. Financial statements for 30 June 2018 have been reviewed along with financial data input form. Following items were noted during our review. These items have been categorized into two types. The first is grouped in the table below, titled Items Needing Attention This Fiscal Year Must Be Addressed Before the Audit Can Be Accepted. Second group is titled Items That Need Attention Next Fiscal Year. Issues are grouped by financial and compliance audit, governmental units, geo bonds, The item that is identified in the general area, budget violations, Exhibit 5 of the audit report shows budget violations in the general fund and the B-Part fund. This should be listed as a statutory violation in the notes to the financial statements and in the GAGAS report. Then there are items that need attention next year, which are not applicable to that item. It speaks to future audits and how to account for or to show, calculate fund balance regarding PAL bill, and also the B-Part fund is its status as special revenue fund, and also the Central Beach fund also.
So you're saying the reason it got kicked back was because they didn't cite us for violating the budget?
That's right.
Can we get a copy of that letter?
Yep. Are you aware of where we didn't, where we violated the budget?
The aspects of violations of the budget are basically where, in the B-Part fund, is where we collect more B-Part occupancy tax revenues than we had budgeted, and then the calculation on the 1 penny that goes to the county, of course, that remittance exceeds what you had budgeted for that year. There's a revenue that's associated with that. So, that's one aspect of it. That kind of thing doesn't concern me because
Well, that's not
it's a
problem, right? You've got more revenue
just
than you
telling you,
expected.
that was the auditor evidently wasn't able to communicate that in the.
What is the auditor's responsibility? I mean,
I'm not an auditor. I don't.
well, I mean, to me, if it's the way, if we didn't do it, and the financial statements report that we didn't do it, the auditor approved the then it's not on the.
We'll find out. And,
Yeah.
in due course.
It sounds like the auditor didn't notice like they were supposed to.
Well.
If I understood what you read correctly.
It's tricky, because we're getting into management's responsibility versus auditor's responsibility. if I'm not running my business correctly and my financial statements show that I'm not running my business correctly, the financial statements are accurate. Because they're showing it. Well, you're not misrepresenting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all the auditor does, is this is a fair representation,
Yeah.
period. They don't make management decisions. They don't, yeah, never mind. They don't mess with the numbers, they just attest to the numbers.
I don't prepare Exhibit 5 in the financial statements. I don't report statutory violations in Exhibit 5.
Okay,
Has that happened in prior years, where the 1% has exceeded 10%?
Happens every year.
we'd agree.
It's a good problem to have.
No, it's a great problem.
It's a good problem to have, you know.
So David, back to my earlier question, what is the process? I mean, what's the, I guess the draft report is given back to us, who's it go to, and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, hold on a second. This is straight from the local government commission's contract.
Okay.
The report of audit submitted to the Secretary of Local Government Finance Division within 4 months of fiscal year end. This is about amending the contract, I'm sorry. If it becomes necessary to amend this due date or the audit fee, an amended contract along with a written explanation of the delay shall be submitted to the Secretary of the Local Government Commission for approval. Okay, that's amending the contract. Okay. The auditor shall make a written report which may or may not be part of the written report of audit to the governing board, setting forth his findings together with a recommendation for improvement. The auditor shall file a copy of that report with the Secretary of the Local Government Commission.
But in answer to your question, the board hired
Yes,
the auditor. The auditor reports to the board.
I got that.
The board wanted to see and wants to see the audit report before it goes out, and in fact has asked the audit committee to review the proposed findings and recommendations, and then we would then submit it.
That was my understanding, was in the past, we've been unpleasantly surprised by stuff that was in the audit that nobody was aware of until it was already in the public domain filed. And that we were going to try to help head that off, so we would know that stuff when it emerges, would be able to validate it, there wouldn't be any surprises. But we are where we were before, which is this is a done deal filed, and nobody, I don't know, maybe everybody knew that this stuff was in there,
But if I understood what David just read, and that was the contract between LGC and the audit firm, is that right, David?
This is the town's contract
Town's
that is
contract.
approved by
By
the
the
local
legislature.
government commission.
That they're supposed to send it, if I heard you right, they're supposed to send it to LGC when they also give it to the Board of Commissioners.
No.
Okay.
Well,
They
there's
didn't
nothing-
say anything about the board of commissioners. We,
What is
the
that?
board, hired them, they work for us, the board.
I got that.
Right, and they should give us the report before they send it to somebody else.
But
We
is
should
it-
see it before it goes to
But
somebody
that's
else.
not what he read.
That's separate, he didn't read that, because that's not talking about that. That's about when they get it. They get it. The
The,
LGC gets it from the auditor, sends it after David signs the
the
thing.
final thing.
But that should, my view is it should only go after the board has seen it, or the audit committee has sat with David and discussed what the findings and recommendations are, so that the board isn't surprised by something.
And I don't disagree with what you're saying. I thought I heard him say
I read
that.
that, it didn't say that, it just says.
What
when
did it
they
say,
get it.
David? David,
It says that basically the audit is submitted to the governing board and the local government commission. It does not prescribe a timeline for either, who gets it first or who does what to who. perhaps maybe the local government commission should be asked as far as who gets the audit first. You know, one thing that I think that you should keep in mind is that local governments exist as extensions of the state, and the local government commission, the state treasurer's office, is charged with oversight of the finances of local governments, and you know, the town of Holden Beach as such, you know, is allowed to manage the funds and the finances. You've got to keep in mind that local government commission can come in at any time and take the pencil out of Holden Beach's hands. So it may be presumptive to assume that there is that the town would trump the local government commissions and state treasurer's authority to provide oversight of the town's funds.
I'm still wrestling with our responsibilities as an audit committee board, and I keep going back to the ordinance that I take as our charter. We are supposed to review the town's CAFR management letter and management response. We're supposed to provide an avenue of communication among the Board of Commissioners of town, the external auditor, advise the board. It's just, I don't know that we're in a position to do any of the things we're supposed to do, given the way it's unfolding. Now, I mean, it's too late. We can't do our job.
Well, perhaps the issue really lies in with the fact that the town has been presumptive in the things that it is envisioned as the audit committee's oversight, because, you know, House Bill 233, which includes the text that already existed in 159, lays out the responsibilities or identifies not only the finance officer's responsibilities, but also the local government's commission's authority to issue rules and regulations on specifically internal control procedures of the local government. So I just offer that up. It's not right, wrong, or indifferent.
Well, that's not us. That's the town and that's the local government. I'm just worried about us as the audit committee and what the ordinance says we are supposed to do as an audit committee.
I will ask the agenda to be put on the agenda for the next meeting, that we clarify this, because the board clarifies for us what, and for David also, what role we play, especially with regard to where the audit report goes.
Yeah, I mean, this is, once again, it's my interpretation of this ordinance of what I thought it was our charter, and we are not in a position to be able to do some of the things that we've
Have the same
been
thing.
charged to do.
So is there anything we need to do in terms of scheduling the meeting with Reeves, or just ask them how quickly we can do it, and then we see if they're available?
We need to have a meeting.
As soon as,
We need to,
Well, just remember, the end of the fiscal year is finished, and we need to be moving forward with working with the auditor, because in addition to the local government commission putting forward that that the audit has bounced, we've also been put on the units requiring assistance list because the audit is not timely, and I don't want that to happen again. You know, the thing about it is, yeah, we had a hurricane. The auditor was new, but it don't take 8 months to do the audit, and you know, we need to start on the next year's
I think we
audit.
need to get them as quick as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, so-
Special meeting whenever we can do
That's
it.
right.
so it's-
Absolutely. What does it mean that we're on the units requiring assistance list? That sounds serious.
Sounds like they think they need to come in and see what we're doing.
See what we're doing?
That's what it sounds like.
Okay.
What depends on.
Yeah. Do they have a basis? Was that a separate letter, or is that in the same letter?
Because the audit's late, because the audit's late, you're being told that you need to get your act together.
Okay.
That's
So we need to-
irrespective of
yeah,
them
okay,
sending
so-
it back.
so-
It was
so
a-
why
That's
is it
right.
late?
That's
It's
right.
everything to do with coming back.
Well, we might just clarify, I mean, there've been delays, the storm was some delay. There were some delays in getting the documents to them.
Well, I think they would have taken into consideration the storm delay, so.
Well, there's been no
if they
delays
put
getting
us on that,
documents to the
it's
auditor.
more of a-
There has been no delays
Yeah,
getting
I want-
documents to the
Yeah, I
auditor.
want to make sure the manager remind me, there's been no delays in staff getting the documents to the auditor. Every time that they have requested something, we've been prompt in providing that with them. If they hadn't got it in 24 hours, they got it in the next day, the next 2 days.
And then there'd be a lapsing time before they would contact me back if they needed something else. Or I would email them and say, hey, did you get what I sent and did it work? And it would be several days before I could hear back. So they got their documents.
But was
I
there any-
called and set up a portal as soon as,
How long
it was
ago did you
finally
get the draft
decided.
report, David?
The draft audit report?
Yeah.
John, I'd have to check. It's not been too long ago. I mean,
How long did it take you to write the management discussion analysis section of the audit?
that probably took a couple of weeks to do because we were right in the middle of the budget.
A couple of weeks, a couple of months?
weeks.
I've been tracking with
I'll
them.
be-
It seemed like it was 2.5
Oh,
months.
you have been, you've been in communications with
Sure
Audit?
have.
Note that.
Whoa.
Is that not appropriate?
No, it's not appropriate,
Completely.
especially when I was designated as the person that was supposed to be working with the auditor by action of the board in open session. No, it's not appropriate.
For the chair of the audit committee, who's the commissioner, to contact the auditor? That's not appropriate?
To ask when the meetings were gonna be held, when we were gonna get together.
So you were actually communicating with the auditor to find out with them when the meetings,
Yeah, when we
the
were-
meetings were gonna be held? It's news to me, John. I just go back to, all I have to go back to is old meetings where it was specifically detailed that I was to be the person that communicated with the audit committee, you know. But if you've had contact with them on several occasions, you know, it just, what can I say to that?
Okay, we move to number 9, any new business?
Whoa. Part of what I'm concerned about, and if we're to have any role here, it's probably recommending the auditors. I mean, we're at the point now where, unless we ante up another 10 grand, I don't think these guys are gonna be around for us next year. I mean, this sounds like,
We
yeah, I
we
mean,
I think
need to
we need to hear
understand,
from them.
I understand absolutely, we need to talk to them.
We need to hear from them.
Yeah, we just.
I don't know if it does any good for us to hear from them, because I think it's contingent on that 10,000. I think if that, any discussion to proceed, this probably needs to be done with the commissioners who have the authority to act. We have no power. I mean,
Well, we
can always call a special
we have no
meeting.
power, but I thought we were supposed to advise or give our opinion, our recommendation or advice. And I'm not in a position, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously two sides to every story, and if this is getting contentious, then the sides are probably entrenching, and we need to know both sides.
I'd call Jay and just tell him we need to meet next week, period. Find a day and let's get together and meet with him. If he wants to visit us next year.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I think you should do that,
Are
John.
we available next week?
Well, we need to see when he's available, and we need to make ourselves
Instead of talking
as best we can.
Can I ask one more question, perhaps will be of some value as we go forward? Is there, outside of a storm or in a normal year, is there kind of a typical calendar for an audit? So
It's due by October
November
31st.
And what are the benchmark kind of leading it? Perhaps that could be something that'd be valuable that we keep track of in the meeting.
My understanding was, after being on this committee over years, I don't know that we ever met that deadline. We're always,
But
it's
pretty
November,
close.
December.
Pretty close.
It's always been a little late, but not
Are you
6
able
months
to
late.
incorporate those into a contract with an auditor? Do
Yeah,
they have to
yeah.
meet those
Well,
expectations?
but you have to remember that the contract is approved by the local government commission, and that contract, it's their form contract, and that's the one that you are allowed to engage in. I think it's probably the best way to do it.
I mean, there are two aspects. One is a contractual obligation, signed contract, but I think you could also have a letter of understanding, whatever. I need this from you on this date. If you give it to me on that date, I will give you this back on that date, and then you can lay all that out because
Y'all,
the steps have been done.
listen. This has never been a problem before in getting this stuff done until this audit firm has come into the picture. And as I understand it, John, if you've been communicating with them, I don't know how they would know who they're supposed to talk to, or who is in control, or who they're responsible to.
We understand your side. Obviously, we need to understand what the auditor thinks. I mean, it's just, there's two sides.
If the town has designated the responsible agent to execute a contract, and there are others involved in communicating with the contractee, that is a problem.
You have no other new business?
Only new business, and we can leave the discussion for the next meeting if we want to. I've seen several articles recently where towns, small towns, large towns have been held up for ransom through cybersecurity, and they've had to pay. I mean, I think it's part of the audit committee's responsibility. We might want to understand what the town is doing from a risk management standpoint to protect us from getting into that situation. Now, I'm saying we maybe will put that as a discussion item and an update from David on our next agenda. Just going to that.
Now, I haven't looked at the RSM report lately, but I think, I mean, it's an internal control type issue, more with the technology than the financial processes, but I think they mentioned something about internal, I don't know. Maybe we omitted it from scope, but yes.
I think
Work
we
with
should
a
have-
client that got
Yeah,
ransomed,
let's
and they
find
have
out
no
what
choice
we-
but to pay
That's right.
in Bitcoin.
In vehicles.
David, do we have a policy, a town policy on whether or not we would pay or not?
No.
We have, well,
So we don't
I
have
think you
policies
begin with an
for it.
assessment of, where your systems, how vulnerable your systems are to cyber fraud. So that-
but I know there was some passwords, all that's in, I know that's been discussed, master accounts and use of passwords, protection of passwords, and changing passwords, and access to the system, and all that. It's all standard internal control kind of things.
It's a serious issue. It was in
It's a-
Florida, had several towns in Florida.
That's right.
I've had two clients that's happened to.
Did they pay?
They had to pay.
Yeah.
They had to
In
pay.
fact, I had a client that called the FBI, and the FBI said, we can officially tell you this, but you need to pay.
You need to pay. Well, yeah. Well, they couldn't pay their bills, they couldn't pay their people, they were blocked, their financial system was encrypted. And then they had to replace all their hardware because they didn't want to take a chance.
I had it happen to a friend the other day. I mean, he got an email that basically said, we've locked your PC, you don't pay us Bitcoin, da-da-da. And he said, sorry, and they said, fine, wipe this whole PC. Now, I'm sure the town has some security software in place, but I think as an audit committee, it may behoove us to at least understand what we're doing so we can say, yeah, we feel good about it.
I would never feel good. Yeah. No, I hear you.
Feel better than I did yesterday. So can we put that as a discussion item for the next agenda and an update?
Yeah. Well, I actually can provide some material, some background on that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Anything else? We have a motion to adjourn,
Make a motion, we adjourn.
My second.
in favor? Aye. Adjourn.